I am Robbie.
We're going to take a whole new look at reality as we count down the best of Hollywood's blockbuster visual effects. Hello everyone, I'm Jonathan Lear and welcome to Space's Top 10 Countdown Blockbuster Visual Effects. Prepare to be amazed as an elite group of artists transform tiny bits of clay and lines of code into some of the most incredible stuff you'll ever see. Kicking off the show in true kung fu and latex fashion is The Matrix, the brainchild of Andy and Larry Wachowski. When the film debuted in 1999, audiences were blown away by its intense action sequences that combined the best of Hong Kong and Hollywood.
I think that if there's anything going on with effects films now, it's that they all tend to look a little similar. They all tend to look photoreal and perfect and all that. But The Matrix wasn't afraid to kind of like push it to be more like a comic book, more like Japanese anime. You know, like it was stylized. It wasn't necessarily real. It looked real, but they weren't paying attention to, you know, the laws of physics per se. It was just like, yeah, let's go extreme. Let's go really like wild with this.
When you can do an impossibility and make it look convincing, and that's really, you know, that's really saying something.
I mean, the bullet time is the thing that people tend to remember the most because it got copied so much. And that tends to be one of your marks of, you know, whether you're an influential film. How many other films and TV shows copy you immediately afterwards? And then you started seeing, oh, frozen time moments everywhere, you know.
The things that people always talk about are the bullet time shots, but to me there was lots of other beautifully done seamless effects in there.
One of the unique innovations of The Matrix at the time was what they were calling image-based modeling, where they were able to actually recreate sets from the film completely digitally in the movie and move the camera around anywhere in it, based on photographs taken of the set.
It was definitely a watermark in terms of visual effects. It really deserved the award that it got.
The Wachowskis' alternate reality efforts won them the Best Visual Effects Award at the Oscars. Not too shabby, considering the other nominee was Industrial Light and Magic for Star Wars: The Phantom Menace. Number 9 in our countdown was not exactly a box office blockbuster, but its effects innovation guaranteed it a place in the top 10. The Last Starfighter featured the first extensive use of CGI in a movie, replacing traditional miniature models with computer-generated spacecraft.
The Gunstar from The Last Starfighter was the first digital spaceship. It was way, way ahead of its time.
When I read a script and someone says to me that they think, this is unmakeable, we don't know how to make this, that's the one for me. That's the one, and it doesn't matter whether they say we can't make this for the money, or we don't have the tools to make this, or we can't figure out how to make this. That's where I just come alive and say, no, there must be a way to make this. If you can think of it, you can make it. There's a way to convey that to an audience. And that's what The Last Starfighter was.
I really appreciated what they were doing. Obviously, you look at that and they don't hold up today, and they were done on, you know, a Cray, the most powerful computer in the world at the time, which could probably be matched by a modern laptop, possibly now.
The Last Starfighter was interesting. It wasn't important enough at the time because it wasn't a huge success. It just wasn't really catching on with people. They were kind of thinking, it's kind of a little chilly looking for me, you know. But at the same time, it does inspire people. They think, wow, that was kind of interesting. And then they'll sort of go away and think about it for a little while and improve the technology.
Though the movie wasn't a financial success, it did prove CGI had promise. The 25 minutes of animation created for The Last Starfighter took only half the time and cost 1/3 of traditional methods. Coming in at number 8 in our blockbuster effects countdown is a movie that stars one of the most iconic and expensive movie props ever, Robbie the Robot.
Welcome to Altair 4, gentlemen.
1956's Forbidden Planet was nominated for an Oscar in special effects and provided the sci-fi inspiration to such visionaries as Gene Roddenberry and Stanley Kubrick.
Forbidden Planet was a real milestone. They didn't have ILM back then. We didn't have we couldn't just sort of phone up any number of 10 effects companies who could do your effects for you. And Forbidden Planet needed these scenes that no one had ever seen before. It needed to accomplish the id monster. It needed to see these spaceships landing realistically. It needed an alien planet. So to accomplish this, the producers went to the only other people who were sort of professionally dealing in creating the unreal, and that was the Walt Disney Corporation.
The great SFX breakthrough for me in Forbidden Planet was, of all things, the id monster. The thing that really impressed me and scared me as a kid was this Disney-like 2D lit-up monster that was destroying these characters I'd gotten to know on the screen in front of me and roaring.
Those animators who created the id monster from Walter Pidgeon's brain, they really caught something. The fact that it's a hand-animated creation gave it this real character and this kind of ferocity, and it's still really effective even today.
Apparently, censors felt that animator Josh Meador's id monster was a bit too much for young viewers when the movie hit the small screen. Shots showing the shape of the monster caught in laser blasts were subsequently removed from the broadcast. T2 and its liquid metal machinery takes number 7 in our top 10 blockbuster visual effects list. Building upon the success of the water tentacle in The Abyss, director James Cameron based his sequel to The Terminator on cutting-edge computer morphing technology.
The walking through the bars thing was actually mapping footage of him onto a computer model and then like warping the model. And it's like, wow, that's really pretty beyond my comprehension how they did that.
At that point, I had been working for about 15 years as a visual effects supervisor. And the very first time I saw the T-1000 walk out of the flames as a molten mercury metal being and resolve himself as the character we'd seen up until then, I was not only as stunned as everyone else in the film was when they saw this guy, but I also knew I'd just been put out of business. I was now officially obsolete.
He basically had this idea about this liquid metal character, and it would have been basically, you know, I don't want to say impossible, but very difficult and wouldn't have looked very good with the existing effects methods. But when computer graphics came along and he first used it for The Abyss, he knew that, okay, I think we can make a go of it with this.
You know, there was no modern motion tracking software. It was all done by hand. Very, very laborious process. Something that would take you a week, you could do in a few hours nowadays and do it better. I think at that time, they were some of the most well-integrated effects with live action done.
That's kind of the brilliance of James Cameron movies. Every time you go to a James Cameron movie, you're guaranteed to see something you've never seen before. And in T2, it was the T-1000. It was this incredibly imaginative idea, and it was realized with very cutting-edge technology. And it was it was the first film that sort of established we can make the impossible not only possible, but seem absolutely 100% real.
The innovative efforts of Dennis Muren, Stan Winston, and the rest of the effects crew for T2 took home the best achievement for visual effects from the Oscars. Battling its way into 6th place on our list of top 10 blockbuster visual effects, one frame at a time, is the stop-motion masterpiece Jason and the Argonauts. The legendary Ray Harryhausen single-handedly animated the 7-skeleton fight and considers it still to be the best work he had ever done.
The skeleton fight was one of the most beautiful stop-action sequences maybe ever done.
7 skeletons fighting 3 men tested my patience pretty much. That took 4 months, over 4 months, to synchronize the skeletons with, of course, every scene we didn't have 7 skeletons, but when we did have, maybe get less than a foot of film a day.
Ray just creating those creatures that moved and shook the earth and was amazing. the fact that he was like God, because he gave these pieces of clay or whatever the material was life. They have personality. They're extraordinary. And again, it's pretty much the work of one man that created the life in these creatures.
Ray Harryhausen understands animation, and that's something that even in computer graphics you have to understand. You have to understand timing, you have to understand rules of motion, anticipating an action, following through at the end of it. And when you do stop motion animation, you really have to know that, because there's no room for error.
The patience that guy has is really beyond belief.
It kind of transcends technique. You had this guy who, in his garage mostly, gave these creatures not just movement, not just life, not just personality, but just this total reality, this total character. And he did it by moving them one frame at a time. That's not technique, that's magic.
Ray Harryhausen not only animated the fight with the 7 skeletons, but also built all of the models with his father in their basement. Coming up, the best monkeys and moonshots you've ever seen. Hey, welcome back to Space's Top 10 Blockbuster Visual Effects Countdown. I'm Jonathan Lear, recapping our list so far. Coming in at number 10 is the mind-bending Matrix. At number 9 is the CGI pioneer The Last Starfighter. Number 8 is Robbie and Friends on the Forbidden Planet. Number 7, the liquid metal mayhem of T2. And at number 6, the stop-motion masterpiece, Jason and the Argonauts. Number 5 on our list is a Tolkien classic brought to life by Peter Jackson and the magicians at Weta. Although The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers is a proverbial smorgasbord of visual effects, one of them stands out in particular.
Gollum was an amazing achievement. There had been attempts before, Jar Jar from the Phantom Menace being a prime example, that people just did not want him to. But with Gollum, he had to really act, he had to emote.
We will swear on the precious.
Along came the second Lord of the Rings film, and suddenly there was a character we knew from the books and we had hints about from the first movie that was as critical and as important and as key to the plot and the storyline as any of the other actors in that movie, and yet he was in essence a construct. And in that sense, this was a breakthrough.
The first time I saw Gollum, I was blown away. One of the beautiful things about Gollum is they used a technique called subsurface scattering, which gave the skin a translucent quality. Light seemed to kind of go through it like it does with our real skin. The animators gave him all these little twitches and ticks, and you could see his hair kind of blowing in the wind.
I think it was a brilliant effort in raising the bar for digital characters, and I think it will deserve a place in the history of computer animation for that reason. Was it 100% convincing? I didn't think so. Was it really a great effort? Yes, absolutely.
I was going to say one thing about Gollum, and I forgot to. I was going to say I think sometimes he looks more realistic than Sean Astin, but that's okay.
James Rigel, who worked on The Last Starfighter at the start of his career and was the visual effects supervisor for the Lord of the Rings trilogy, once said, in the 80s, you felt like you were crossing the Great Plains in a covered wagon because no one was doing graphics on the computer. There were years you questioned if it would ever get off the ground. It's like anything. If you stick with it, it will improve. For Rigel, CGI clearly improved. He took home the Oscar for Best Visual Effects for all 3 movies.
They do not see what lies ahead when sun has failed and moon is dead.
Climbing his way into number 4 of our countdown is Marion C. Cooper's 1933 effects classic King Kong. Though the real Kong, brought to life by stop-motion magic of Willis O'Brien, was only a 16-inch high model, the budget to bring him to life was massive for the time. The special effects budget for King Kong was $650,000, 3 times the budget of an average RKO movie in the 30s.
When I was 13, my mother took me to a film called King Kong, and I haven't been the same since. So that really set me on my career. And I always attribute the giant gorilla as responsible for getting me into special effects.
It was a masterpiece. It's sort of an effects person's effects movie, Not just the animation of King Kong, but the matte paintings. It's beautiful if you look at it. It's just very artistically done.
With King Kong, it wasn't just the stop motion. They threw everything in there. There was glass painting and projection and compositing and like, model work and every special effects tool you could think of. They had the best stop motion animator at the time, Willis O'Brien, who made the original Kong. And he took a character which was like the size of an action figure, like 18 inches high, and actually gave it personality and actually made you kind of care about this monster. It's supposed to be this threat that you're supposed to hate, but they make him a little sympathetic in the end.
I actually felt more pathos for Kong in that 1933 film than the modern one.
In an interesting side note, you may have noticed that Kong's fur seems to ripple when he moves. This is because every time the animators would move Kong, they would push down on his fur, which was, by the way, from a rabbit. What? A top 10 for blockbuster visual effects and no Steven Spielberg? Don't worry, Mr. Spielberg and his DNA-laden computer dinosaurs have secured number 3 on our list.
Those dinosaurs were extraordinary. It never felt I'd seen something so legitimate, right there, live, tangible almost.
It made you believe that these computer animated characters were actually posing a threat to these people.
I mean, you really got a sense of what a living dinosaur might have felt like. Some of those the first shots, I think the Brontosaurus, it was kind of standing up on its back legs to grab some leaves of a really high tree. I mean, when I saw that, it gave me the shivers a little bit.
It was the first appearance of really convincing computer animated characters. There had been the water tentacle in the abyss a couple of years earlier, but James Cameron, the director, had done it in such a way that if the effect hadn't really worked out, he could have cut it. But with Jurassic Park, you can't cut the dinosaurs out of that. They are the film.
I was at ILM when they were doing Jurassic Park, and a large portion of those shots were going to go to Phil Tippett's studio as stop motion, and Dennis Muren had kind of convinced Steven Spielberg to go full CG. After that film, I think everybody in the industry knew that stuff was absolutely the wave of the future.
So with the success of Jurassic Park, you saw a flood of CG animated creatures. Let's give them dragons, let's give them tornadoes and, rampaging monsters. And people did, to some extent, continue to support those kinds of films, but Jurassic Park was the first, and it still set the bar very high.
Spielberg was very happy with how his CGI dinosaurs came out, and so was the viewing public. Jurassic Park grossed over $350 million and is the 12th highest grossing movie of all time. Over budget and half a year late, the first editor's cut of our number 2 movie was, in the words of the director, a complete disaster. Thankfully, Mr. Lucas was able to tweak his little space fantasy for the better and give us one of the best visual effects movies of all time.
I walked out of that film, got in my car, and drove home like I was driving through the Death Star Trench. That's what that film actually did for me. You want to know the absolute truth? I drove home like a menace.
Boy, I sure love that opening scene where the ship comes in very close to camera with the planetscape in the background. Breathtaking.
Nobody expected what we sat down and saw. I don't know if audiences today can relate to how we jumped up and shouted when the jump to light speed happened, or the first time Luke fired up that lightsaber, or things that we kind of take for granted now were really firsts in that movie.
Everything looked lived in, everything had this kind of grungy quality to it. It didn't feel artificial. Even as a little kid, you could sort of sense, oh, that's kind of cardboardy. Oh, that's funny, there's a zipper running up the back of the monster. And Star Wars had none of that.
The TIE fighters are flying around, the Millennium Falcon, and they're basically like they're gunners in a bomber, going around and shooting them. It's great. People respond to that because it takes something people are familiar with, like a war film, and translates it into a new place.
I got him! Great kid! Don't get cocky!
For people of my generation, people in their 30s, it was tremendously influential. particularly people who work in the special effects industry. Everyone my age grew up with Star Wars.
After discovering 20th Century Fox's special effects department had been disbanded, Lucas had to start his own company to do the effects for Star Wars. From its humble beginnings, Industrial Light and Magic would become one of the biggest and most successful special effects companies in the world.
Hit the accelerator.
Coming up next, prepare to go on a journey with the #1 blockbuster visual effects movie of all time. Stay tuned. Welcome back to our Top 10 Countdown of the best blockbuster visual effects of all time. Here's a recap of the list. Number 10, The Matrix. Number 9, The Last Starfighter. Number 8, Forbidden Planet. Number 7, Terminator 2. Number 6, Jason and the Argonauts. Number 5, The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers. Number 4, 1933's King Kong. Number 3, Jurassic Park. And at number 2, Star Wars Episode 4. When you think of Hollywood blockbuster special effects, you usually think of fantastic fight scenes, incredible explosions, amazing monsters, and non-stop waves of heart-pounding action. Well, our #1 film has none of that. What it does have is one slightly confused computer and what may be the most realistic vision of space ever created.
It's an extraordinary piece of work, but the thing is that Kubrick, he made science fiction, impressive because it was so kind of banal on one level. It wasn't fast-paced rocket ship zip pack. It wasn't Flash Gordon. It was just this stuff.
2001 was really interesting because it was done as if somebody was really in space filming that stuff, so it looked very realistic, like footage from NASA.
Douglas Trumbull did the effects for 2001, and they were, again, very, very innovative. They were done at a time when most space special effects were kind of cheesy UFOs hanging on strings. And what Kubrick needed was absolute realism, and that's what Trumbull gave him. It has an underlying scientific reality that, even though we're now well past the actual year 2001, watching that movie, it has a believability to it. It has a textual reality to it. You feel like everything's been thought out to the letter.
2001 it came together because he had some ideas for, weightlessness in outer space and like journeying through this, time stream, this tube, this tunnel, and he didn't even know necessarily how it was going to look. It's just like, do something cool. He's going through a transition, and I just threw it out there to the team, and they delivered something that people had not seen. And that's what makes a milestone. It's like when some people go to the theater and they come away thinking, I had not seen anything like that before. And that's what 2001 did.
It's one of the few films that you can watch and the effects actually, for the most part, really hold up today.
On 2001, Kubrick said, I felt it was necessary to make this film in such a way that every special effect shot in it would be completely convincing. Thank you for tuning in to Space's Top 10 Countdown Blockbuster Visual Effects. I'm Jonathan Lear. See you next time.